that led later among Christian theologians to a discussion about omniscience. If Christ is God, or the Son of God, was he omniscient? Presumably. I mean, surely God, if he is all-seeing and sees all time and space, he would know, on what day did my brother wear my red coat last, 40 years ago? And if Jesus couldn't answer, then he's not the Son of God, That would be the kind of way you caught him out. However, wise theologians have said, like a Hindu sage, a friend of mine, Swami Chaturvedi, said, when we were discussing omniscience, he said, Thomas, omniscience isn't knowing everything immediately where it comes into your mind, but it's knowing where to look to find out the answer. So maybe that is a skillful use of your Aeonic powers. I mean, the internet is an amazing treasure of Aeonic wisdom for mankind, that we can instantly look up stuff that in previous eras I'd have to go to 100 libraries and spend lifetimes working through scrolls, but now I can research it in 10 minutes. This is Aeon, Al-Basir, the all-seeing one. Because I think the good news here is that God wants us to know these things. These are the 99 names of God, or the 78 names of the gods. And we are supposed to be able to see these things too. That's why we're given the internet. That's why we're given the alphabet. Just to say, there's an ancient house in Paphos, Cyprus, called the House of Aeon, archaeologists have discovered. And in the house is a central panel depicting the god Aeon presiding over a beauty contest between Cassiopeia and the Nereids. And this is a wonderful part of a mosaic, right, in this House of Aeon. And it's been interpreted as an allegorical Neoplatonic esoteric teaching. The Nereids were the 50 daughters of Nereus and Doris. She's also there on the mosaic. And they were important because Achilles' mother, Thetis, was one of them. And Cassiopeia, he declares the winner of the contest. And he's giving her a crown. And she represents, the universe. She is a constellation, Cassiopeia. And so the universe wins out, the cosmos wins out over the sea goddesses. It's a difficult call to decide. And it's really interesting that Aeon is chosen to make that judgment. And he is the God of all eternity. So the more we discover about astronomy, and there are new discoveries coming on all the time, huge new galaxies out there through this new James Webb telescope. And they're finding water out there in a vast abundance. And, so Aeon is the God of all that. He's the God of infinite time and space and the all-seeing. So, interesting deity, I think. He deserves to be known better, I think. And in the Gnostic traditions of Valentinus, who was one of the greatest Gnostic Christians, he uses the term Aeon to mean like a charge within cosmic consciousness. And they come in paired opposites. There are 3 pairs of these eons which emanate from the Eternal One, called the Psyches. So for instance, you have mind and thought, or voice and name, or reason and reflection. And these are all called eons. And it's interesting that, they're that important. So anyway, I've made Aeon consort of the air because, in a sense, he's inside all air, and that's why he can see it all, as the Lord of space-time. So there we are. That's Al-Basir and Aeon.
All right.
Thank you. Right, let's do one more, shall we?
Okay. Well, I'm not sure if this is the best one, but now that we have been talking about all-seeing,
Yeah.
I'm curious about the all-hearing.
Excellent, okay. All hearing to balance all seeing, that sounds a good idea. Yeah. The hearer of all. Asami. Yes. It's funny because I knew that was the name. My 99 names of Allah are a bit rusty. If I was living a fully Islamic life, I'd know all these by heart, but I do know them deep down. So Asami is the one who hears all. And the word Sami is related to the word Shem or Semite, which are all names that mean hearing or listening. And it's also the same as the word Shem, which means the word. The Semitic religions are all about hearing, listening. The Bible, which is a Semitic religious text, drawing on many, many ancient sources, Babylonian, Egyptian, through the lens of the Hebrew tribes, which were kind of a late comer really in the Middle East. They were a wandering group going back to the time of Abraham, who was only 1750 BC, not very ancient, who was an eclectic gatherer of wisdom. Abraham travelled in Egypt, he travelled in Upper Turkey, he travelled in Palestine, the Holy Land, and he was good at listening. He was having conversations with God at night, reported in the Bible. He could hear the innermost thought of the intelligence behind the universe. When everyone else was asleep, he would be listening. And then he would hear, So I think it's God gives to his servants that faculty. We can listen to what's really important. There's and I don't think just humans have this. Animals have this as well. Dogs, for instance, have very, very keen hearing. There's a true story of a dog that, it's a kind of rescue dog, a normal dog walking along the beach with its owner in, I think, Northern California, sandy beach. And suddenly, a dog shot off and started swimming out to sea, and the owner was thinking, what's come over that dog, crazy dog, He galloped 300 yards down the beach and then started swimming out to sea. And after a while, when he caught up with him, he saw that the dog had rescued a drowning person, a woman, who'd been crying way beyond our hearing range. The dog had heard it and actually swum out and saved her life and towed her back to land and had that amazing faculty of hearing. So that's a divine faculty that animals have as well as humans. What would it be like to hear all the cries of the world at once? Like every baby that's crying that's an orphan or has no food or has no milk because the mother's been killed. Or what about all the children that are hungry and starving in Yemen or in other places where there's been war and or in the pockets of poverty that exist even in so-called, rich countries like America and Britain and so on. There's still pockets of great poverty. If you could hear all those cries at once, what would it be like? Well, in Buddhism, they say there is a bodhisattva called Kuan Yin who can hear all those cries at once. She listens in, which is an astounding thought. And because she can hear them all, she wants to make it better for them, She can also hear the beautiful things that people are doing and the cries of happiness and the laughter. She can hear talks like this, That's good news, but she is the compassionate bodhisattva who cares for the world and listens into it all. So she'd be the Buddhist equivalent of this, the all-hearing. They say that hearing is the last sense that perishes when you die. And I've read reports of near-death experiences when the soul has left the body, it's now hovering above the body that's being operated on. And it can hear still the discussion that's going on in the operating theatre. Now, there's no possible way it could hear normally because the ears are always blocked up. The brain is chilled, so it's not functioning. There's a famous case of Pam Reynolds. She was super cooled and the brain was dead as they were operating on something. And yet she could hear the discussion going on in the operating room. So there must be the soul, whatever you want to call that okima that relocates after death. When the physical body goes, the soul lives on. When I was working in hospitals, I often had to wash the corpse of people that died. And that's a dead body, you know what it looks like, and you put it in the morgue. That's not the person I was talking to, and that was the soul, I realised. That was part of my own spiritual awakening. It's really good to work in hospitals to learn these things. So that hearing must exist in the soul in some extraordinary way. It's parapsychology hasn't really begun to explore that. What could the soul be made of that it can still hear? It must be made of some sort of diaphanous micro-etheric substance that can respond to vibrations, which is all sound is. Sound is vibrations in the waves caused by the vocal cords or the musical instrument or whatever. And the soul must have the ability to respond in some way. It'd be nice to do experiments. Parapsychologists have managed to capture spirits on tape, voice transmissions, but so far as I know, they haven't been able to ask, how are you hearing us? Very few philosophers actually seem to get access to parapsychological equipment, which is a shame. William James was interested in all this stuff, as was Jung. But anyway, the hearer, the all-hearing, is a beautiful quality for God. But also slightly, perplexing. It's a bit like the omniscience thing. How can God cope with hearing everything all at once? I mean, it must be a total nightmare because you've got a million demands. Let's say you're listening into all the prayers. Let's just say on this planet, right? Per day there must be, 10 million prayers a day, right? I think there's a movie when God is played by Morgan Freeman and there's a computer where all these prayers are coming up. And, how does he answer them all? What does he do? So, there's also a famous passage in the book of Enoch when Enoch goes to heaven and meets God and is shown the screen that keeps a record of everybody's thoughts, actions, deeds and karma at any one point in the world. It's like a computer screen. And this was in the book of Enoch, written down 800 BC. How would they know about computer screens and stuff? But they seem to. And they visioned it being in heaven. But I've often puzzled about this, It seems to me, if you can crack the speed of light, if God can move faster than the speed of light, which he definitely can, like Odin and Sleipnir, or like the Flash, but times a million, then presumably if God hears one cry from this direction, then he would send a thought to this person who can fix it. So let's say there's a fire breaks out downtown Chicago, there's a fire engine roaming around. Suddenly the driver thinks, I know what, I'll turn down this road. And lo and behold, there's the fire. It seems to me that one of the ways God deals with the simultaneity of hearing everything is through synchronicities. He gives us inspiration to do the right thing almost by accident. So we turn up with the spare change when the beggar's starving for the last 3 days or whatever. And I think that the response is done through us, humans. and other animals and things. We are, because God can't be everywhere at once, so he devolves his intelligence into us, into humans, so that we know how to be compassionate and kind and hearing, so that we listen to people. And that's what priests do in confession. That's what Sufis do. When you have a trouble, you take it to them, or Buddhists, or any sage, counsellors, counselling, it's just being listened to. And being heard is 9/10 of healing. So the one who listens is manifesting that quality of God, I think. So yes, thank you, as Sami. Now what is the deity equivalent? Who can we say is going to be the equivalent? That is going to be interesting. Yes. Well, I'm going to say Nabu and his consort, Tashmetu. They're sort of a couple, they come together, a dyad. And there's a picture of them here. Nabu was a very important god in ancient Sumeria and Babylon. And there's his consort, Tashmetu, behind, who's got a camera, she's filming him. I'll explain in a minute. He's the ace of air. Now, Nabu, very important god for scholars like me. He's the god of literacy, the rational arts, education, and scribes, and wisdom. And his name, Nabu, means to announce or prophesize. And it comes from the Semitic root, NB, Navi. And in Hebrew, Navi means a prophet. So all the prophets of the Bible, all the prophets of the Quran, and the entire Semitic tradition of Judeo-Christian Islamic thought are all built around this idea of the prophetic intelligence that can listen, hear to God's thoughts. And Nabu, or Nebo, is the deity in charge of all that. We could call him the Mesopotamian god of prophetic intelligence. Now, you learned all this stuff if you wanted to be a priest or a philosopher in ancient Sumeria, which was the land between the Tigris and Euphrates, where Iraq is now, and also on up into the north of Tigris, Euphrates, and also down to Kuwait. He was worshipped in Borsippa, particularly Babylon's sister city, and his implements was the stylus resting on a tablet, which was using, because these guys invented writing, which was like the start of formal education. And he became the god of scribes and teachers and all those involved in reading and writing and literacy and the works of wisdom. He had a horned cap, and he was identified with the planet Mercury, which is the same as Buddha or Buddhi in Hindu religion, identified with Mercury, who's the same god as Hermes. He was worshipped continuously from about 3000 BC down to the 2nd century AD. And these guys used writing cuneiform. Now, you can't learn anything unless you can listen. I know as a teacher it's really difficult to get kids to listen. Sometimes a loud class of 30 kids, they all want to be out playing football or whatever. They're not interested in the subtleties of Nabu. It's only sixth form and above that, university students that would be able to listen, because they're really interested. But so, the god of learning is the same, I'm arguing, as the god of listening. And that's why we see it in the prophetic intelligence, or the work of prophets, because prophets are the ones who can hear the word of God. Mostly we don't get to do that because we're normal people. We can study and we can learn and we can read and we can remember. it takes a special skill to tune in to the Word of God and listen to that. But that's what some people can do, like Muhammad or Jesus or Moses, because they've taken this prophetic intelligence to the highest degree, right? They can tune in, and I would say, I mean, what I like about the Quran and why the names of God are so important, the all-hearer comes from the Quran, is because the Quran loves all the prophets. Muhammad was a real universalist. He loved all the prophets. He didn't want to condemn anyone that followed this or that prophet, because every tribe has their prophets. So he never heard of Druids, for instance. He didn't know that the Celts had prophets called Druids. And one of our functions is seership and listening, tuning in to the gods and their needs for humanity. So as a kind of peace druid of Britain, I've been tuning in to Parliament and realising that Boris Johnson is mendacious and a lying ruler. And I can hear it. It offends my inner listening as a druid. So I'm really pleased tomorrow the vote, he will be excluded from Parliament, I hope forever. He was found to be lying in Parliament. So that's, that's really how druids function. We hear something wrong and then we try and send out the vibe that will transform it to good. I've been saying for 6 years we should have a parliamentary ruling that any politician that lies in Parliament is excluded from Parliament. It's taken 6 years for Parliament to do this. We've had 6 years of this ignorant Tory government that can't listen. My definition of a bad government is they're not able to listen to the people, to truth. So, but the Quran, here's a little word. Remember Idris in the book. Verily he was a truthful prophet. This is from the Surah 19, verse 56. Now Idris is one of my favourite of all prophets because it's the same as Hermes and Enoch. It's the Quran's way of saying we believe in all these esoteric prophets that we've never heard of. That's why Idris is in the book, because Muhammad was humble enough to get that download from God. He could listen in to God's thoughts. Don't ask me how they do it. Tune in and receive that. Yes, remember Idris in the book. Verily he was a truthful prophet. And we raised him to a sublime station. That's the exalting thing again. In other words, God took him to a place where he could tune in and listen to all these the divine wisdoms. And they are those whom God has blessed among the prophets, of the progeny of Adam, and of those whom we carried with Noah, and of the progeny of Abraham and Israel, and of those whom we guided and chose. When the signs of the compassionate were recited unto them, they would fall down prostrate and weeping. In other words, their hearts were so finely tuned, these seers, these prophets, to the listening, that they gave, mankind wisdom. Well, that's what Nabu, I'm arguing, is the deity of. Now, most Muslims have never heard of Nabu. Very few people in the world have heard of Nabu. I just happen to know because I'm an expert in comparative religion, and we found 20,000 clay tablets in the city of Mari, which was a sacred city. It's on the Euphrates in Syria, and I wanted to be an archaeologist when I was a kid. I still want to be an archaeologist. I'm an archaeologist of the soul now. And it was British archaeologists in Nineveh and Syria that translated or helped translate these cuneiform tablets. There's loads in the British Museum, which talk about Nabu's work. And also tablets were found in Ebla, which is also in Syria towards the coast. And a variant Semitic language called Eblaite is used for these tablets. Now, this is really exciting. Scholars are now translating all this stuff. And finding Nabu was a really top god, because he was the god in charge of all this learning and wisdom. And yeah, I think, and he's the god of the Navim, the prophets. So if we could focus and listen and realise that God is the hearer of all, not depending on your religion, but the God of true wisdom, who hears all, then we might have a little more tolerance and more harmony, between the different rival factions and nations on the planet. I think where Boris Johnson and the Tory party went wrong was they stopped listening to Europe. They were just so full of their own internal chatter about being right. Their arrogance and ego takes over. You can't listen unless you have humility, because of course there'd be nothing to listen to, nothing worth listening to. And that's the problem with arrogant leaders like Putin. You can't talk to him at the moment because he's nothing to listen with. He's lost his soul of listening. I'd be happy to talk to Putin. He can ring me up anytime, but he won't listen. Only when he starts to listen again to the divine truth behind all religions will there be peace. So anyway, there's a lot more. If you're interested in this stuff, then you need to get hold of this Tarot of the Gods, which is an epic 2,000 page, 2 volumes, and the actual cards as well, which are here. And the image of Nabu is on the cards, and all the other gods, beautifully hand painted. So there we are. I think that's those are 3 good ones to do. And may you find benefit from listening, and find your own prophetic intelligence, so that we can build the peace on the planet as a whole. I'm really sad about the refugees flocking into Europe and getting drowned in the Mediterranean and stuff. I wish they could, I wish we Europeans, the European Union, could help rebuild their country so they don't have to do that. It's a desperate thing to have to flee your country. We should be giving aid to Libya, to Syria, to Palestinians and elsewhere, and Iraq and all the rest, and Britain should be doing its fair share in America, because of our foolish rulers, we've helped destabilise these regions. We've bombed and attacked Iraq, which had done nothing against America or Britain. We ravaged it for no reason whatsoever. And the least we can do is then help rebuild it properly, so that these people are happy to stay in their own beautiful cultures. Iraq is an amazing country, full of mysteries. Same with Syria. It's one of the oldest countries in the world. Libya too, North Africa, where the Carthaginians were. We should help, these people shouldn't have to flee in terror from their own falling apart countries. We should help bring stability and peace to those regions. And that's why I set up the Truth and Reconciliation Commission for the Middle East. And the religious leaders of all the countries and regions should help to stabilise and bring a culture of non-violence and listening, because that's the only way we can rebuild, through truth. And corrupt leaders like Boris Johnson and his ilk, Putin, and people that don't listen, I think they should need to go back to school. They're happy to come to my classes. Come and visit me in France, and we'll do some advanced listening classes. Because active listening is the core of peace building. So that's why these deities, they seem obscure and so what, but actually they're really important for the underpinning of the chaos that we've got now on the planet. And that's why I've sort of invoked the gods to come back and help us all through the tarot and through the names of God, Right. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you,
Was
Doma.
that interesting?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, good. Excellent. Well, I hope everyone enjoyed that. And I'll see you all in 3 weeks.